Thank you guys for coming. Sustainability and travel. Those are words that have not gone together a lot lately. We've been hearing so much about the enormous carbon consumption of aviation, so much so that people are telling us that we should just not bother getting on a plane. Just don't bother. You will break the world. My job, for as long as I've been in travel, not as long as some of these guys, but still a long time, my job has always been to be the optimist and to believe firmly and to teach people, hopefully, how travel can be a force for good in this world. And so that's what I want to talk about today. For starters, a little bit of data to prove that I'm not a hopeless optimist. In the last 5 years, the travel industry has accounted for 1 in 5 new jobs globally. Around the world, 319 million people, that's 1 in 10 of every single human beings that walk the earth, are employed by travel and tourism. And those of us who travel, people like us in this room who like to spend our money on nice things and put money into local economies and buy nice locally made souvenirs when we travel, we pump $9 trillion into the global GDP. That's not nothing. That means a lot of people depend on us for their livelihoods. And I think nobody knows that better than the 3 people who are sitting here with me today who have possibly the most holistic view on what sustainable travel means. The human sides, the green sides, the difficult business decisions and the good ones. To talk about all of that, Denise Nikki, who oversees sustainability, both strategy and execution for Marriott. Harsha Chanrai, who has the coolest nonprofit that relates to community engagement all around the world. And Herrera, who's kind of like a circus ringleader. He informs the worldview of 20,000 luxury travel agents and how they put forth what travel should look like to all of their clients around the world. No big deal. Harsha, I want to start with you because what you do is a little bit harder to understand than the 2 people that you're flanked by. Sure. Talk to us about the problem that you identified in your years working with big brands like Aman and Six Senses and how you're fixing it now.
Sure. So, well, thank you for having me here. Saira Hospitality is a nonprofit I started about 5 years ago. And I realized the need on both sides of the industry. I was working at the Aman in Sri Lanka. And I overheard an interview between the general manager and a local who was applying to be a pool cleaner. And I could see very much that the need was great on both sides, but he just didn't have even an hour or 2 to understand the knowledge and skills that he needed to be able to get this position. And I also saw, like many of us here, understand that the turnover rate in our industry is at 73.8%. And I thought to myself, there must be a way to reduce that level of turnover and to also meet the needs on both sides of the spectrum. So what we do is we partner with luxury and lifestyle hotels who often struggle to find this well-trained local talent. And we create pop-up hotel schools for local communities who otherwise wouldn't have the knowledge and skills to be able to then build these careers in hospitality. So by engaging the local community, we're allowing brands to integrate into communities which they often struggle to do so. And we're also providing them with well-trained local talent with our turnover rates being around 10%.
That's amazing. And that's a really, I think the important thing there is that not only is this good business practice from a moral point of view, but the fact that you're reducing turnover makes it economically very, very sound and in the interest of a hotel as business as well. Denise, you've talked a little bit about how sometimes the ROI on community engagement initiatives is not obvious, but I know that you found that it does exist, and there is always a clear line if you are willing to look for it. Talk to us about Marriott's work in this arena and how it pays off.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. With 7,100 hotels around the world and over 730,000 people that wear Marriott name badges, it's really important for us to be part of the communities that we are in 130 countries. We cannot be successful if we are not embedded within that community. We cannot stand alone as a building that people come in and out of without having that connection. And so how we build that are multifaceted. We absolutely build on and bring in local talent. It's very critical for that community to have the sense of place. It is also really important for us to source locally. We have some very specific goals on doing exactly that, so we're bringing in product that is made in the area. We are also really looking at how do we leverage the community of our own associates to go out into the world around them and be part of the solutions of challenges around, whether that means planting mangroves in Thailand, volunteering to educate students in certain communities, or just using their culinary skills to help budding chefs be interested in the hospitality sector. We have all this amazing talent, so it's really important for us to make that connection all the time within the communities where we are.
Well, and I remember you saying to me once, it wouldn't matter, people wouldn't go to Bali, to our beautiful and probably some of your most expensive hotels. People wouldn't bother making those reservations if the beaches in Bali were trashed.
Absolutely.
And it's, I think, right, you have to both train and work with local communities to make sure that the environments around the hotels remain beautiful so that both the tourist and the local benefits from a better place in general. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, one of the bigger challenges around environmental issues is that the impact of what something happens in this country impacts a lot of things downstream.
Yeah.
So it is really critical that we don't just address the end issue, but where the original source of things like, for example, plastic waste comes from. And because it is really impactful, both to the communities that we are operating in, but also into our economic benefit of having guests there. A lot of people saw the impacts of things like, red tide or algae blooms in certain areas that really impacted people's need or desire to be in those locations. We have an opportunity to make an impact by understanding where those things are coming from and really understanding what is our role in helping to mitigate some of those issues.
I think that's 100% right. Albert, I have a question for you, but I'm going to set it up with a poll question for the audience.
We love polls.
So take this moment, if you haven't already, TYAluxury.app. It is your friend. Let's see if we can pull up a little question. All right, is sustainability something that you consider before booking a hotel? The options that are currently covered by a black box are no, location and price and level of luxury will always be my main concerns. B, wait, hotels talk about sustainability. C, it depends on where I'm going. And D, yes, I need to undo some of my own carbon footprint. Albert, my question for you, not taking into account the numbers that are going up and down on the screen right now, how much of this is chicken and how much of this is egg? Consumer demand, is it there for sustainable travel, or is it our job to teach people?
Well, the reason why I said I love polls is because what we do every year is we actually do a study with our consumers in Virtuoso. And every year, we see a growth. So for 2019, 75% of the consumers that we have said that sustainability is an important factor in how they choose a destination.
A destination.
A destination,
Okay.
a hotel, all these things, because they want to have travel with purpose. They want to make sure that it's relevant, it helps educate the people, their kids, and that's what's important. It is changing, especially with those that have the luxury, the time and the luxury spend. It's different per demographic ages, from a millennial to a Gen Xer to a boomer.
So who's more interested in sustainability, and who are you having to educate?
Boomers have more time.
Yeah.
And Gen Xers are growing as well, increasing, because now they're the ones who are looking at how much time do I have, and I want to help save the planet as well. So.
Well, something that you've said to me that I think is very important and interesting, and Harsha, I'm curious how you feel about this as well. The answer, it depends on where I'm going. That's purposeful. I think sometimes when we're thinking about a luxury safari, somewhere where the purpose of our trip is to be in a natural setting where we are much more conscious of the natural resources and things like conservation. Those are settings where I think it depends on where I'm going, applies. But I know that you would argue, and Harsha, I'm curious how you feel about this, that these questions are just as important in major urban cities.
Definitely. Extremely important. I mean, we all travel a lot, right? And you look at the sort of the magnifying glass now in terms of the single-use plastics. I mean, the last year alone, all the drives that are all changing. So maybe obviously in an Amman resort where you worked, or your reserve in Bali, but even city hotels are changing the basics from plastic to aluminum to you name it, just that way it's sustainable. So, and travelers are looking for that because people get disgusted by the plastic that's being wasted.
Denise, do you think about how you message these things a lot?
Oh, for sure. And so much of what we do, we don't just segment it for luxury does this and nobody else does, or resorts do it this way and nobody else does, because ultimately our travelers, all of you, are coming in and out of our hotels in very different settings and situations. There should be consistency in what you're seeing. It does not mean that we want to be more sustainable in one place versus the other. Our goal is to lift all boats, right? In order to really be a responsible company, and as the largest hotel company, we do have that responsibility to lead and really drive sustainability, social impact throughout our industry. We have to understand what that looks like universally. And it's not going to be the same thing everywhere we go, but it is absolutely imperative that we understand that it's not just for the places that can do the right things that they're allowed to do it, and everybody else sits behind.
I want to come back to this idea, but before we do, Harsha, I found it very interesting that Saira started in LA.
It did.
It's a concept that you would think only makes sense in the developing world,
Right.
but in fact, you had great success in LA. So talk to us a little bit about how we can think beyond plastic and beyond these types of, not washing the sheets every day and all of the things that are sustainable as we understand them, also in major urban centers.
Yeah, I think what we do is we go back to the true meaning of the word local, right? Which is an inhabitant of a local community. It's not about the product, it's not about the food, it's about the actual person. It's about the reason that that bar or restaurant becomes a local bar or restaurant. It's because one person calls that place home, it's their local. So what we do is we think, okay, yeah, maybe you have to go to Africa. We just finished a project in Namibia, for example, which touch wood, will graduate tomorrow and be a huge success. But if you look at downtown LA and you look at the issues that they're facing with the homeless, and you look at New York and you look at cities like London where we all called home, it's about not thinking, oh, we have to travel across the world to help people. And I think hotels, especially in downtown LA, which is such a hub right now for all these lifestyle hotels, all these hotels that say they have purpose, that say they care about community, they can't keep building this neighborhood and not think about the community that they're entering, and not look to give education and give opportunity before they start taking these resources and filling their hotels with conferences and guests. So I think that, yes, we often think about luxury safaris and how we can make an impact there, but it comes down to the people. What are you doing for these people when you enter into a neighborhood, and how are you making their lives better so that the guest also has that kind of touch and that kind of local talent serving them, which goes back to what you were saying about how that's what's important for guests today.
And I think there's also a lot of question about how we as travelers engage with these markets in such a way that we fulfill that type of promise, that we patronize the local establishment. I think we're all concerned with that. We all want that to be the reality of our travels, but even with best intentions, Albert, you can certainly speak to this, we sometimes flood the same spots as everyone else, and volume becomes a problem, and management becomes a problem. How are you guys combating that?
It is a sticky wicket, right? Because obviously we're here, Virtuoso, all of us here, are to promote travel around the world, right? In the meantime, how do you stop this where you have over-tourism, over-saturation of certain markets? So it really is being able to educate folks as well. Like if you have to go to Venice, go the months before, the months after. So giving them options.
The months before and the months after high season is what
high
you mean,
season,
right?
yes, exactly. I'm sorry, I meant high season.
Yeah.
Because our jobs here really are to tell the story, how to educate the traveler, what options there are. That way it doesn't take away from key business, but yet helps supplement and complement other areas of the world that truly need the business. And sometimes consumers just don't know. So that is our job, and that's what we do all the time, is to tell their story, your story, to the consumers.
But in a way, it's also a very convenient thing from a business point of view, right? Yes, this is good for the world. This is good for the destinations that need a little bit of help managing over tourism. It's also good for the travel industry to convince people, to give people a very good reason and a personal incentive to book during a slow season when A, they're going to get value, and B, when your business probably could use a little bit of a lift, right?
Exactly.
You're saying everyone wins.
Yeah. Everyone wins.
I think the travel industry is probably uniquely positioned to take advantage of that scenario. Maybe not every other industry could pull it off this way.
Well, we do try our very, very best, because it's always, again, a challenge with certain regions of the world changing, the political, you name it, whatever goes on around the world, or Mother Nature takes its toll. But yet, yes, there are opportunities to be able to tell our story.
Denise, you are probably best positioned to talk about how we scale these ideas from being really nice ideas that affect a particular market and take them into this global rollout, which I think is what you were alluding to before, right? You have hotels in, is it almost every country in the world?
130 countries. I don't know how many countries are ever.
It depends how you count them. It depends if you count principalities and territories. You guys, if you are going to commit to an idea, it has to be scalable.
Absolutely.
And you have to convince the individual owners of Marriott hotels all around the world, because as people might not realize, Marriott does not own the hotels. You have to convince those owners to then deploy these strategies, and you have to convince them that they are good ideas for their bottom lines as well as for our collective conscious. What's the next thing that's going to be deployable on that scale? How do you think about that, and what are you eyeing for 2020?
So in 2017, we rolled out a set of goals for out to 2025, and it touched on a lot of different areas of focus. Our platform is called Serve 360, doing good in every direction. It looks at our both environmental and social impacts. And so as we set out these goals, we really identified what can we make most meaningful change on. And one of those areas is around waste reduction. We set a goal to reduce our waste by 45% over that time period, from 2016 as our baseline to 2025.
When you talk about waste, that's inclusive of?
All waste that goes out the hotel. And we set a specific goal to reduce food waste by 50%. And we have absolutely no idea how we're going to get to that finish line. But we knew that it was an incredibly important area to focus. And so we started small. We tested ways that hotel chefs could get insights, use data to understand what it is that they're wasting on a regular basis. How can they make changes in how they're preparing food on the front end? Not just about focusing on their donation aspect, although that was a second or third step that they could take, but really understanding how they can reduce food from being produced. And we started with 10 hotels doing one form of that, another 10 hotels trying a different path, and then getting understandings, what worked, what didn't work, and then developed a path for all of our hotels then to understand what is the area they need to focus on most, what does that look like, how do you use tools and resources to implement those, and then start measuring it and really understand that.
Why food waste?
So food waste, for those of you who don't know, makes up 11% of carbon emissions for the world.
Let me stop you. That's an enormous number. Just to put it into context, right? We started talking about the footprint of aviation. The footprint of aviation is between 2 and 2.5% of global emissions. You said food waste is?
11%.
Okay.
11%. So if we're going to tackle major issues against climate change, let's look at the food that we're producing, 30% of which never makes it to people's mouths.
And
it's
that's
an unbelievable
breakfast
waste.
is part
Everything.
of the problem?
Everything.
No, but the breakfast buffet you've said is like especially problematic, and it's so sad to me because I, and probably many people in this room, love a beautifully laid out breakfast buffet, but you've convinced me that I should rethink that strategy.
No, I think it's not just on you as a traveler. I think it's on us as a deliverer of that great experience. And there are plenty of ways that we can deliver those great experiences without creating food waste.
You said that just the idea of having the buffet stocked all the time, making it look like it was just perfectly laid out for you the moment that you arrived, is a driver of a lot of
person to walk through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you said something very smart to me, which was that just putting things in smaller containers.
That's right. So as the buffet goes on through the morning, instead of refilling a buffet platter that is, this big, it's smaller and smaller through time.
So it still looks
full.
full.
It feels full, but you're literally wasting that much from an egg, scrambled eggs, because we want you, Nikki, even though you've walked in at 9:59 before the buffet closed, you need to get your scrambled eggs. So it's never been touched. That's
Nikki.
right.
Yes, that's how it should. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Albert, you've said something very smart, which is that it's not always about having a big idea yourself.
Exactly.
Explain that perspective.
Before I even go into that, I love your story because we have an event every year in Las Vegas for 6,500 travel professionals around the world and travel partners. And we look at the food, obviously we were tasked with, we must be sustainable. So we're in Las Vegas, in the desert. Where do you find sustainable stuff, right? So we have to select every single item that is sourced locally or sourced within 50 miles, 10 miles, or wherever it may be. That way it's not wasted. It doesn't, the carbon offsets are not large. What we do, Virtuoso, back to her question, is what we do is we don't have hotels. We don't have tour operators. We work with them around the world. And what we do at Virtuoso is we listen. We hear many good examples. We're not here to change the world and say, this is not the new standard for sustainability. Our really goal is to tell the wonderful stories that you all create, the wonderful best practices that you all put together. And that is where we come in, because we influence travel. We influence the consumer where to go, to educate them. And it ties back to our 3 pillars, which is celebrating local culture, helping the local economy, and more importantly, helping the planet as well in the future. So that's what we do best.
I would love to see you guys, I'm going to give you a challenge. I'd love to see you guys connect some of Harsha's initiatives to some of the new hotels that you guys are seeing in the pipeline. I think it's an example of what you're talking about. And not to put you on the spot, but
you're all witness to this.
But no, I think, you know, this setup right here is an example of just what you're describing, because we have someone with a brilliant idea that could really enact serious change all around the world. And Harsha, you've said that your issue is scalability. You have a hard time figuring out how to tap the next project or how to get manage the resources to be there for the next project when it knocks on the door. Talk a little bit about that, so that these guys maybe will be influenced to work with you.
Thank you very much for helping us to scale. But it is a struggle. You know, I took a different approach to nonprofit. I watched my father work with Mother Teresa, and we were very much, my 4 sisters and I, one of who's here, and were very much influenced by the need to give back. However, we didn't want to take, or I didn't want to take a traditional nonprofit route and rely on donations. So for all of our projects, they are funded by hospitality owners and operators who are looking to find the well-trained local talent. But it is difficult to scale because we're challenging an industry that has always walked into markets and poached, right? That's what we do as an industry. We poach, and then we wonder why we have high turnover rates. It's just like marriage, right? If someone's going to cheat, they're going to cheat on you, they're going to cheat on the next person. So we sit here wondering, why do we have high turnover? Well, you're finding someone who just left that hotel for your hotel is one of the reasons. But you're also not talking to that community that need this opportunity. You're talking to just people who maybe want it, maybe want to try housekeeping, but they don't need it. They don't need these entry-level jobs or careers. So yeah, one of our struggles is scaling. It is getting the word out there. It is getting the industry to think a little differently. It is saying to them that your turnover at entry-level employee is $5,834, and if you have 200 employees, you're looking at $900,000 a year. But people don't think ahead. People say they invest in their people, but they don't want to do these pop-up hotel schools. They don't think of the brand presence like I think you do, in terms of how do we really integrate and how do we get them on our side and how do we get community diplomacy. So I would really appreciate your help in scaling.
You heard it here first.
I do what I can. On that note, I want to ask you guys a question that is just a personal one, and maybe you will inspire folks in this room to change their personal travel habits, and we can create a ripple effect from all of the power brokers that are sitting here with us today. The question is, what's your New Year's travel resolution? How will you lighten your footprint in 2020? And I'll give you a second to think about it while I volunteer mine, which is that I recently reported a story on the footprint of aviation and came across a company called Cool Effect that does probably the most legitimate, verified carbon offsetting for aviation. And so I will plug them now and commit in this arena to using them for all of my flights in 2020 and beyond. I will pass that to you.
Great. So for me, my commitment is I travel a lot as well, and one of the things I want to do is eat more sustainably as I travel. So it's easy to grab and go, but I want to eat more sustainably. So I'm committed to, at least for the first quarter of the year, to test it, to try to do only vegetarian meals on the road.
Cool. Harsha?
I think that my resolution for 2020, as we're traveling a lot on projects, really is to keep with the theme that we use at Saira, which is to give. And it doesn't have to be monetary, and it doesn't have to be clothing. It can just be sharing things that we know, the education. One of the things we talk about at Saira is just what is Airbnb, what are loyalty programs, what's Uber, just things that we know from where we're coming from to places which maybe they haven't had that kind of education or opportunity. So just to really share through education.
Albert?
Like every good trainer, you have to be able to be trained as well. So Wow, this is a good one. It is really, every year we always have an initiative in terms of what we're going to be rolling out that is meaningful, rewarding, and, and helps the community that we live in. So my goal for next year is really learn something new about what we can do to help affect the world and change the world. So again, we were also told the other day, no blame, no shame. Start where you are today and improve on that, build off on that.
Right.
And I intend to do that as well in terms of what we do as a travel network and how to make our place a better place to live. Oh,
Right.
and maintain my concierge key status with American Airlines.
And for all of those of you who answered answer A on the poll that you do not think about sustainability when booking a hotel, hopefully we've at least convinced you that it is actually very easy to make that choice and to think about it. Thank you guys
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.